welcome back. For today's video, I wanted to try out something, and that is reading the highest rated book on my TBR and the lowest rated book on my TBR. I went onto my Goodreads. I have a whole bookshelf dedicated to my physical TBR, and so I sorted it first for lowest and then highest to see which books were at the bottom and the top based on Goodreads ratings. I came up with my lowest being The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake, and the highest is Funny Story by Emily Henry. So the plan is I'm going to read these two books and kind of compare to see how accurate the Goodreads ratings are for these books, because I have heard sometimes that certain books do get a bit like review bombed when people don't like the author, for example, or some other books get overhyped, especially because of like TikTok and stuff. I wanted to kind of see if there was any bias there in these ratings, or if maybe potentially Atlas 6 is better than it seems to be rated, or if Funny Story is not as good as it seems to be rated, though I kind of doubt that this is misrated because I do love an Emily Henry book. Follow along while I read these two books. I am now 150-ish pages in, and I have prepared my thoughts. I decided I wanted to kind of keep track of all of these characters. The Atlas 6 is, so far, about 6 magicians get chosen to go through this kind of selection process, where 5 will be chosen to advance to more study in this Alexandrian society. It's kind of like the archives of the Library of Alexandria. In this book, we have the 6 characters. They were chosen. They didn't like apply for this. They didn't know anything about this until like this guy, Atlas, showed up and went, "You will talk later. Show up or don't, I don't care." Now I've met all 6 characters. I can finally start to like form opinions on them. First of the 6 we have is Libby, and Libby is a physicist, or as the back calls it, a cosmologist. Her magic, I suppose, is tied to matter and moving, reforming atoms, but specifically she is good with fire and sometimes has like a lack of control on this fire that can like lead to her setting things accidentally on fire. She is often described as like fidgety and anxious and like, you know, like tucking her bangs away and constantly asking questions, getting on people's nerves because of her anxious energy. I have a soft spot for her already. She is kind of like overachiever. She's described as bossy at one stage. People think she's annoying, and just like that kind of character really does have a soft spot in my heart. Kind of like, say, the Hermione Grangers of the world, or just that kind of characterization. I always feel like, you know, almost like a kinship towards those kind of characters, being called bossy and annoying myself, especially when it comes to talking about things I like. So yeah, just something about her. I'm rooting for her. I like Libby. She has a boyfriend outside of this Alexandrian society, and she also has this complicated relationship with another one of the characters called Nico. More on him in a minute. Their dynamic is very interesting. Like, her and Nico were in the same university and they both graduated top of their year, joined together, and in every aspect of their college lives they were constantly being compared and shoved together. She wanted to get away from that, but then obviously they were both chosen for this magic, don't even know what to call it, kind of like a sponsorship. Someone calls it a fellowship at once. It's kind of murky what it is, but it's not really a school setting. It's more of a they're all living together kind of setting. That dynamic, yeah, the dynamic between the two of them is really interesting, and I'm wondering, are they going to end up together or get together at any stage? Because they also, by the way, they don't like each other. They have this like rivalry from being the top student and also having the same kind of speciality, but already they have acknowledged that while they may not like each other, they might be better together in this situation, especially because if one person's getting plucked off and these two have the same speciality, the obvious choice would potentially be to kick one of them out instead of someone else. So they're kind of coming to an agreement. So that's interesting. But moving on from Libby, we have Nico, who is also a physicist slash cosmologist, but his powers are really interesting. They're kind of more earth facing. He kind of creates like mini earthquakes or like earth tremors. Not quite as like full blown as an earthquake unless he wants it to be. But when he was like fidgeting and nervous at one stage, like there was little like vibrations in the ground that, and no one else could really feel them, but Libby could feel them, and she was like, hey, cut it out, please. He also at one stage started to manipulate gravity, so obviously he can definitely do other stuff, which I was like, whoa, okay, I did not realize this was on the plate. And because of that, he seems incredibly powerful, and that's very interesting to see that they're equaled, but he so far has been more outwardly powerful in my opinion. He also experiments with magic that isn't within the physicist strand or field. That's interesting that he's trying out these other things that he's obviously not as good at them and it doesn't come as naturally to him, but he still does it and he's pretty good at it still, even though it's not his thing. So very interesting. He has this really intriguing relationship with this guy named Gideon. I also feel like Gideon's character slash his relationship with Nico and Gideon's like relationship is kind of giving us more information on the world and the politics of this book. So I look forward to seeing where that goes and maybe more information on what world they're living in. And next we have Parissa, and she is a telepath. She can read minds. So already we're moving to a much different type of magic. She reads everyone's minds all the time. She's clearly very ambitious and power slash money hungry, but I assume that comes from a lack of security. You know, she potentially, I don't know, again, I've barely met her. It feels almost like maybe she grew up with a lot of uncertainty, and so she is looking for almost like financial independence, as funny as that sounds. She will read like people's minds to see what they want from her and use what they want to get what she wants, which is usually power and money. It is very interesting, but I'm sure there's kind of like a deeper bit there on why she is how she is and why she uses her powers in this way. She does feel like she's kind of being set up as like a kind of an antagonist because of these powers and how she like views the other magicians, if you will. She's definitely interesting, but I wouldn't necessarily want her as a friend. I quite like her character, and obviously her powers are cool. She's definitely not a great person, but more could come from that. Like we could find out more about her. I'm still speculating about her backstory and stuff. Kind of like a little question mark over that. Like surely she's not just designed to be a bad person. Surely there's reasoning behind it all. Next we have Raina. She is a naturalist, but I say that naturalist. Naturalists, like natural nature, they do stuff and can control nature and do stuff with nature. But Raina specifically is kind of confusing when it comes to her nature powers. Her point of views have been more scarce, so we've kind of seen less from what's inside her head and what she's thinking and doing. She can manipulate like a life force almost. It's like she's giving her life force or something, or into her power into like plants. She could and get them to do stuff for her. They also seem to like speak to her. So she has a really weird relationship with plants, and I definitely think there's more to her power than we've seen so far. She also doesn't seem to like her power and is trying to avoid it and has tried her hardest to actually get away from it. She actually, instead of studying and improving her powers, she studied classics. She loves to read, which is such a plus. I feel like as she learns more about her power, or like as she dives into it, she will get really powerful and it'll get really interesting. I wonder where that'll go. I assume, surely, she's going to just like tap into this crazy power that she has. Next, we have Callum, and he is an empath. He can actually manipulate emotions and desires. This guy is like wealthy and an asshole. So what I get from him is really that he's the baddie. Maybe there's more to him, why he is how he is, kind of like Parissa, but he seems, I don't know, I feel like the more to him is worse than we already know. I don't think he's good. There was this part that really set him up as scary. It was off screen, off book, off page. Him and another character are away dealing with a thing, and when they come back, he's like happy as anything, he is himself, he's whatever, but the other character is spooked after seeing what your man did, whatever he did off screen, off page. The other character won't speak about what it was. We don't know what he did. And so I think there's something like really unsettling about him. I assume we will find out more as to what he did, potentially even in the next chapter. I don't know, because I stopped right at the end of the 3rd part. So obviously there are chapters, but then there are parts as well. So at the beginning, and then it goes to 1, weapons, 2, truth, 3, battle. And so I finished battle, the whole part, and here I am updating you. I'll probably update you after the 6th part just to keep it consistent. I could find out in the next chapter what Callum did, but as of right now, it's definitely being set up as, yeah, you don't want to know. I wonder, but I also could be completely wrong. So we'll see. Finally, our final 6th member is Tristan, and he is kind of an illusionist. His power realistically is that he can see through illusions. It's actually kind of ambiguous. His power is definitely more than it seems, which, you know, is kind of ironic, you know, being an illusionist. It's hinted very much so that there's more to it than him just seeing through people's illusions. There was a little bit of him kind of demonstrating his power. He could like look at a picture and understand like its history and who the person was, what they were doing, and just get all of this information that actually isn't possible. He's just extremely perceptive is his power. Something like that. There's definitely going to be more unraveled here with what his power is. Maybe almost kind of like Reyna. Maybe they're both gonna kind of figure out their things and become really, really, really powerful. Because also they were chosen because they are really powerful. Just more about him is his father is a crime boss, and Tristan has spent his whole life trying to get away from that and like have like a good cushy job and just be set for life and to be as far away from his father as possible. What really came through in the last like chapter or 2 is him having this really big hang up about being useless. How it didn't look like his powers manifested for years. His father would like would say he was useless, and you know, he's like, oh, as annoying as Libby is, at least she's useful. You know, stuff like that. That is our cast of characters. I'm liking them. I think it's a good mix and I like the dynamics. My current prediction, and also this can't be a spoiler because I've literally not read it yet. My current prediction is either all 6 get through to their further study or something, or Libby or Callum are on the chopping block. Those are my guesses right now as it stands. I obviously probably won't be able to tell you if I'm right. This video will still not have spoilers, but I will obviously share my theories with you up until the point where I can't anymore, that kind of thing. So I'm gonna keep going. I'm actually really enjoying this. I love a new fantasy world, I don't know, and I'm enjoying getting to know the characters. I'm enjoying the people in this, and I think that's the key for me to enjoying the lore and all the rest. So I will update you next time. Hello, I am going to update you now on how I'm getting on with the Atlas 6. So I've read like the middle section now, part 4 to part 6, which were space, time and thought. I'm gonna do my hair and tell you my thoughts as I go. First thing about these chapters is that I'm finally learning a bit more about the characters and about what's going on in our world. Part 4 to part 6 is all about them starting their research. Space is the first thing. We literally see like characters creating wormholes to travel between rooms, stuff like that. Each of the parts are labeled for what they're kind of researching at the time. Each of the different types of magic excel at different things. So when they were doing about space, the physical side of the magicians were shining a bit more than the telepath and the empath. And then Tristan is kind of there in the middle sometimes, being like, who am I? What am I? Am I any use at all? I was definitely right about some things. We do actually find out what Callum, the empath guy, did around Parissa that made her so wary of him, and she continues to be extremely wary of him this whole section. This act, I won't like spoil it or anything, it kind of ruins any bond they could ever have formed whatsoever. And I think something very interesting that Callum actually says is, trust once lost can never be reformed. There are obviously some other parts that I got quite wrong that I can't really go into without spoilers. Someone else I want to bring to our attention is this guy called Dalton. He's another character. I did not talk about him in the original video because he is not one of the 6, but he was one of the 6 the last go around. He is very powerful. He's gotten a lot more fascinating as time has gone on, and we find more about his power, but also there's this really cool scene, not to spoil anything really, because I don't think it's spoiling. Parissa goes into his mind and we see some weird stuff, or like kind of weird, but more like it opened up a lot of questions to me about him. Who is he, or like who was he, if that makes sense, before all of this. I won't elaborate too much on that for fear of spoilers. Some other things they have been researching is thoughts and like doing thought experiments. There's been a lot of talk of like time travel. Tristan has been kind of like warring with this whole thing about him not being very useful, and I think I mentioned that earlier, that he like feels not very useful in just life because of his father and how poorly he was treated when he was younger. With time though, there's a bit of like a theory going around that maybe he can see time. He can still be a bit of a mystery. One thing that is slightly unsettling is that he kind of knows what Callum is like. He still kind of hangs around with him, and they're actually kind of friends and reliant on each other, which is like conflicting, but it's also conflicting to Tristan. We're also getting some inklings that things are not as they seem, that maybe the society isn't like the best of things, or people kind of being hinted at that they're not like the best people. Because there's this other group, the Forum, very Roman, I know, that are like the opposite of the society. They, much like, you know, Roman, they want open discussion, and they realistically think that the society should not hide away all of this information they have. It should be shared in an open forum. While some of what they say is compelling, I don't exactly like their methods of trying to convince our 6 that their way of thinking is better than the society's, because they go for like the 6's weakness rather than being like, hey, please help. Probably will be more on that, or like we'll see more on this group and whatever they get up to as the book goes on. And something else that was a surprise, there was just a threesome in the middle of the book at one stage. Did not see that coming. Maybe I should have read the signs. Something else is that the characters are definitely evolving in their own ways. We have Libby is one of the people who are kind of evolving. I still really like her as well. She is starting to stand up a little bit, like maybe like tamp down the anxiousness just a tiny bit. She's still categorically herself. Nothing is changing that, but it's still nice to see. I do think Callum is a pretty good adversary, I suppose. I don't want to say like villain or antagonist. I don't know. He's definitely like crooked or whatever, but in a way that's so open that like surely he's not the big bad, as I like to call it when talking about books. Is the big bad is like the end goal evil that you're trying to beat. He's too overtly antagonistic to be the big bad. And I think I'm sticking with that maybe him or Libya are the ones that are going to be like not chosen to join the society. But I suppose I'll have to see with that one. I'm actually really enjoying this. I am enjoying this book way more than I thought I would after seeing the reviews. Or not necessarily the reviews, but like the rating. Because the point of this video is reading my lowest and my highest. And the reason I started with my lowest rated because I wanted to end on a high rather than to read a really, really good book and then be stuck when I'm reading a not so great book first. I know there's a good book, a book that I know is going to be really good, especially since it's Emily Henry, coming. And that kind of helps me motivate myself to get through, even push myself to sit down and just, oh look, read 50 pages. This has not been like that whatsoever. I've been really enjoying this. So that was my update. Not enough to get 2 braids done, but however. I will see you next time. Hello, it is much later now. The sun has set, so we have our artificial light back. And so I had time to think about the book and the ending and everything that happened in this. And I just put together some of my thoughts to give you a little wrap up of how the book went and what my thoughts were. I won't go too long or too in depth or anything because I will be obviously doing my November reading wrap up, so I'll just give you a brief rundown. The end of this book was interesting. In one way, there was a lot of like revelations, like really big like moments, you know, and there's a specific character, I won't name who it was, but one of the characters in the book had this kind of like crazy backstory that we got to know in the last 100 pages. And I feel like that's when the plot or like the point of the book really ramped up. Got a bit crazy and you find out things that you weren't expecting, or at least I wasn't expecting. I liked it, but it still was like you're compensating for not much happening in the rest of the book. All of it was happening in the end sections. Something about the big reveal at the end was that I thought it was kind of cartoonish and silly, like the motivations behind certain decisions that certain characters are made was kind of just silly. Really, that's the motivation? I still do think the end was very like, whoa, what's going on? And so all in all, I did really like this book. I liked it a lot more than I thought I would, which is pretty much the whole point of this video, was to see the way my TBR list is kind of ranked, and I want to really compare this book to the next book I'm going to read, which is Funny Story by Emily Henry. So I'm excited to see if there's a big gap between the two, considering there's about 20 books between them on my TBR. I did dive into the reviews of this book to have a look to see what people in general didn't like about it, and one thing I saw a lot was about before it was published in like a traditional sense, like by a publisher. I think it was self-published. And apparently it needed a lot of editing. People found a lot of typos and mistakes and plot holes or something like that. Like that was something loads of people were complaining about in their original reviews, and then they'd edit it and be like, oh, I didn't read it when it was published traditionally through a publisher. Things may have been fixed. That's fair. That's totally fair. Like you can't argue really with that criticism if it objectively had like bad grammar. That being said, I did not notice any of that in this version, and it's published by Tor Publishing. That was the big criticism I saw. Something else is that people really disliked the characters and they felt like they were pretentious and fake, which again, I also I see where people are coming from in that sense. I like the characters. I found like the different energies very interesting, like seeing how these distinct, like very distinct characters interact with each other. And I suppose that's what I liked. I liked that they were so different from each other, and like I could tell who personality was what, you know, what kind of character they were all throughout. I hate confusing characters for each other or like getting them mixed up. So having 6 really unique main characters, I thought was pretty good. But yeah, they are pretentious. That's like the whole point. I think the book is pretentious in general. Does it fall into that dark academia side of things where a lot of those books are like that? You know, they have characters that are like elitists and value intellectualism over all else and can be quite uppity about it. That's kind of just what you sign up for in dark academia books, I reckon, because that is the genre or subgenre. So I kind of expected that. The characters are really fake to each other because they don't trust each other, and so that does make sense. And I do think if you don't enjoy that when you're reading, it makes a lot of sense why people would rate it lower, with that being the reasoning. Something else is people dislike the lack of plot, or I suppose kind of like the filler stuff. And again, I see how that would bother someone, especially if they don't like the characters in that book. If you view the plot as bad and the characters as bad, you're not getting anywhere. So that is really valid. I enjoyed the characters and I enjoyed their interactions, so I feel like I was okay with, oh, they're researching this, they're doing this, these are their interactions. And you saw a lot of the pairings and how they interacted with each other. I think the author was having fun with seeing, oh, how would these two interact? What would these two say to each other? What about if these 3 were involved in something messy? What about this half of the group? You know, I can forgive a lack of plot as long as there's some kind of overarching like thread and reasoning behind everything that's going on. I still quite liked it, even though I see where people were coming from. I really did like this book, and I've stuck the next book on my want to buy list, so I will keep up with this series. I liked it. I really liked it. On to the next one. Funny Story by Emily Henry is the highest rated book on my TBR, so apparently it can only get better since this was my lowest. I'll see you guys next time when I am reading Funny Story. I'm here to give you my final thoughts on Funny Story by Emily Henry. I know I didn't get to update you much as I was reading, purely because I read this book in one sitting. I stayed up till 2 a.m. to finish this book because I was hooked. I won't go too in depth because I will be including this in my November wrap up with its rating and everything, but I will give you a brief look at the book. First, obviously, this is my copy. It's hardback and it is also signed. I love this book. The story. We have Daphne and Miles. Those are our main characters. Daphne was engaged to this guy called Peter. Miles was going out with this girl called Petra. Petra and Peter were best friends from like childhood. During Peter's bachelor party, he goes out and does bachelor party things, and Petra is at this, being that she is his best friend, and they end up staying together late at a bar and drunkenly admitting they have feelings for each other. So now we have Daphne and Miles, both single, nearly single, with nowhere to live, because Daphne was living in a house with Peter and Miles was living in an apartment with Petra. Miles and Daphne end up living together. This book is navigating that dynamic while also having the shared exes and also having like this magnetism towards each other. They're supposed to be opposites a little bit, but they still kind of keep coming together during certain moments and stuff. Daphne is a librarian, a children's librarian, and that is really sweet. Emily Henry loves to have her main characters to be like writers, editors, you know, like in the book world, almost the literary version of Ali Hazelwood with STEM. So you can see that really appeals to me. I love that kind of running, almost like joke or like habit of an author. And then Miles kind of does a few odd jobs in this small town. He kind of is like beloved by everyone, and everyone thinks he's like brilliant and very kind. Like this guy is really sweet and actually nice. In this, you can actually say Miles is actually like the definition of a nice guy, a real nice guy, not a nice guy, you know? Miles, he does kind of odd jobs, but mostly he works at this kind of wine bar and he knows a lot about wine. He is the supplier as well, like, so for this kind of wine bar, they also serve like bits of food, of course. And so he goes out and goes to all the farmers markets in this small town, knows all the people by name, and everyone loves him, that kind of way. Daphne is not from this town because Daphne moved there to be with Peter. She's in this town that she never really had her own friends in. The house wasn't in her name. All she really had were Peter's friends. Obviously she had her job, but she never really made this effort to connect with any of her co-workers. When that relationship ended, she was stranded. She didn't know her co-workers well, so she couldn't really explain what happened to them. She ended that relationship in a bad way because she had no roots to this town. Then when she moves with Miles, Miles becomes pretty much the only person she knows, and she's getting to know him, and then she makes more of an effort to reach out to her co-workers and make more friends and become part of the town, even though she is the whole time throughout the book considering leaving the town. And so that's kind of another layer to it. Is she going to leave or is she not? Because realistically she does not have that much connection to the town anymore because of Peter. I adored this book. I clearly could not put it down. It's so good. That's all I can say. Like, read this. She only gets better and better. When you don't think it's possible for Emily Henry to write a better book, she comes out with a book like this. Like, incredible. I can't recommend this book enough. In terms of thinking about it compared to the Atlas 6, this is definitely a better book, or like I enjoyed it a lot more. I do enjoy both fantasy and romance, so I don't think that's very biased. I kind of hate to say that the Goodreads rating might be kind of right in the sense that I do think this is a better book, but should the Atlas 6 be all the way at the bottom of the 20 book strong TBR? Maybe not. There's not a crazy difference in rating for me and these two books. Obviously, not going to spoil what the ratings are, but you can probably guess. Wait for the November wrap-up video for that. Those are my final thoughts really on both books. I definitely really enjoyed both of them, which was surprising because I thought the Atlas 6 would be much worse than it is. I was thankfully not at all disappointed by Funny Story, which I knew. I knew. We knew. We both knew that I would love this book. That is how I felt about the Atlas 6 and Funny Story. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, here's another one that YouTube recommends for you. I will see you next time.